medical right around the corner here. I'm not going to.
This is Fighting Words, and I'm Carissa Maxwell, joined with senior combat writer Andreas Hale and senior combat editor Tom Gray. We're coming to you on a Monday because we just could not wait until Wednesday to talk about the greatness that we witnessed this past Saturday with a 9th round TKO from Terence Crawford to win the undisputed World Welterweight Championship. It was one hell of a fight. It was one hell of a fight week. Andreas and I were there. We were in T-Mobile Arena. We saw the energy. But before we get into the details, I'm clearly fresh off a plane, just landed back from Vegas. So, Tom, I'm going to let you do a little bit of the talking. I want to know what you thought of that fight watching from home and if it lived up to the hype.
Virtuoso performance by Terence Crawford, just completely dominant. It's already been talked about along the same lines as like Hopkins against Trinidad or Roy Jones against James Toney back in the day. Just one of those performances where you have got two great fighters, but one guy just proves to be several steps ahead. I thought Crawford was out of this world. It's the sign of a truly special fighter that on your biggest moment, you turn in the best performance of your career. He was virtually flawless. I think, Spence was brave, but ultimately outgunned. And I can't say enough good things about Terence Crawford. I thought he was magnificent. I said when I spoke to you guys a couple of weeks ago, and I said when I wrote about the fight, that he just looked, for the last 6 or 7 years, I rate him as one of these guys that's kind of sprinkled with magic dust. Sugar Ray Robinson had it, Muhammad Ali had it, Sugar Ray Leonard had it, Roy Jones at his pomp had it, Floyd Mayweather had it, Andre Ward had it, Terence Crawford has it.
I'm surprised you didn't gloat about you picking Terence Crawford and Andreas owing you $100. And don't worry, I will hold him accountable to that. We will exchange Venmos after the episode. But when we went into fight week, per our last episode even, we were talking about how this is not necessarily a 50-50 fight, but it was supposed to be this really close matchup and no one knew who was going to win. And that was not the case. So in that aspect, it didn't live up to the hype of being a 50-50 fight, but it was a dominant performance by Terence Crawford. And that was so obvious with the energy in that arena. It started with Eminem and it ended with a TKO. But Andreas, you were sitting not ringside, but a lot closer than I was. I was up in the skyscrapers. What was that energy like down there on the floor, just seeing these fans having that realization moment that they were witnessing history?
I mean, for me, it was, as Tom said, this is an incredible performance, a virtuoso performance that nobody truly expected. I don't care what anybody says. Even if you pick Terence Crawford, you didn't expect him to wipe the floor with Errol Spence Jr. And what you saw in the arena was fans, celebrities, entertainers, media, all with their jaws on the ground, witnessing what was happening. We thought, plenty of people thought that this would be a close fight and both would have some ebbs and flows. People who picked Terence Crawford thought Terence would come on strong late. People who picked Spence thought that Spence would get some distance. Nobody predicted that Terence would beat the fight out of Errol Spence about 4.5 minutes into the fight. Nobody predicted that. So the entire arena was buzzing, but in a different way because they recognized and saw that an avalanche was coming. And it was just a matter of not if, but when. So everybody was whipping their phones out. I remember I saw Damian Lillard and Stephen A. Smith and Shannon Sharp. And you just go down the list of celebrities, Chris Brown, all had their phones out waiting for Terence to finish the fight. I've never seen anything like that in terms of a dominant performance in a fight that we truly expected to be a battle of the ages. But only one person came to the war, weaponized, and that was Terence Crawford.
The star power in that arena on Saturday night was absolutely insane. There was one point they're showing all these celebrities up on the Jumbotron, and I was sitting next to former world champion Chris Algieri, and I turned to him and I'm like, what do you think the net worth is of the people just sitting ringside alone? I mean, we had Mark Davis was there, Jerry Jones, I think, was there. So between them, you got a couple billion right away. I mean, it was insane, the caliber of fans that were there to witness this fight. And Andreas, to your point, everybody was, just shocked with the way it ended. But I think the person who was probably the most shocked was, of course, Errol Spence Jr. And I saw him leaving the ring, the arena, to go to the medic tent right after the fight. And he had his head high, but it did not look good. I mean, that guy he went through some stuff. I obviously hope he's okay. We don't know really, if he suffered anything long-term damage or anything like that, but you could tell that he was just defeated. So all that being said, he was coherent enough to say, yeah, of course I want the rematch. As much as I enjoyed watching that fight, I don't think I want to watch it again. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, Tom, I know you wrote an article for Sporting News talking about who you think would be better opponents for Terence Crawford to face rather than, having a rematch with Errol Spence. But do you think the fans need to see this fight? Do you think Errol needs to see this fight, or does Terence just need to move on and continue his path towards greatness?
I think both of them need to move on for now. I mean, we live in an era now where these immediate or direct rematches are standard because it's written into the contract early doors. I'm totally against it. I had that fight. I don't know how you guys had it, but I had it 7 rounds to 1. It was a wipeout. If you go back decades, Frazier beat Ali probably 8 rounds to 7, 9-6 maybe, and Ali had to wait 3 years to get him back in the ring. Leonard Hearns, 8 years for the rematch, and Thomas Hearns was winning that fight. Hearns, after fighting Sugar Ray Leonard 3 months later, was in the Bahamas on a Muhammad Ali undercard fighting for next to no money whatsoever against Ernie Singletree at middleweight. 1 year later, he'd beaten Wilfred Benitez at junior middleweight, became a 2-weight world champion, and didn't need Sugar Ray Leonard. We live in this era where now it's money over logic, money over legacy. A lot of the brain trust of Errol Spence won't want him to take it easy at super welterweight and, just get acclimatized to a new weight division. They want to make as much money as possible. So let's put him in there in a direct rematch against a man that he cannot beat. I don't even care if they move up to 154 pounds. I think what we've seen in that style confrontation is that Errol Spence can't beat him. Terence Crawford's a better fighter. I mean, all Terence Crawford would need to do is a couple of squats, some deadlifts, eat a couple of steaks, and he'll be up at 154 pounds, and he's still going to cause the same problems. So last night, to me, Errol Spence took 5 or 6 fights worth of damage. And I don't want to see him going through that again, 4 or 5 months from now, when that guy could move up to 154 pounds, conceivably 160, and do something great for his career. And Terence Crawford's not going anywhere. That guy's as fresh as a daisy. So come back and fight him in 2 or 3 years. A direct rematch, he'll get wasted. At welterweight or super welterweight, it won't matter.
Once upon a time, Tyson Fury ran over Deontay Wilder, and then they had a third fight, and it ended up being an absolute classic. There's a big difference, though. As you think where I'm going with this is I'm saying Errol should get the rematch. No. Deontay Wilder made all the excuses in the world. He said they poisoned his water. He said the ref was drunk. He said his suit was too heavy. He came up with a billion excuses and made it a pro wrestling promotion for the third fight. There is nothing that Errol can say or do that would make fans want to see a third fight because it's not who Errol Spence is. He's not a man who makes excuses. I asked him directly after the fight, was the weight cut a problem? He said no. He wants the rematch at 154 pounds. Terence Crawford obliged and said, I'm in the hurt business. I welcome that. This is not a situation where Errol's going to say I overtrained or I wasn't ready. He just got beat up. I don't want to see the rematch. What I do want to see, however, is Jermell Charlo get pulled from the Canelo fight so he could fight Terence Crawford for the 154-pound titles. That's what I want to see. That's what I want next for Bud. Bud knocks down Errol Spence, I believe in the 7th round, and runs to the corner and immediately starts yelling at Jermell Charlo. The storyline writes itself. Derek James is also Jermell Charlo's trainer. The opportunity for Bud Crawford to be a 3-time undisputed champion. It's all there. Canelo's messing up everything. It's all his fault. But I don't want the Spence-Crawford rematch. I don't want it right now. I'd rather see Spence fight somebody like, say, Keith Thurman at 154 pounds. I'd rather him do something else than to go back in there against a man that completely had his number. This was not a one-round domination. This was a pilfering. This was a savage beating unlike anything we have ever seen between 2 pound-for-pound fighters. Tom, I almost forgot what Bernard Hopkins did to Tito Trinidad. This was worse. This was one of the worst beatings between 2 greats that I've ever seen. I don't need to see it again. I'm good.
You probably get Thomas Hearns arguing with you on beating Roberto Duran, but I take your point, right? I mean, it was a different type of fight. The thing that could happen at super welterweight is that Spence is more durable. Do you know what that means? He'll get beat up for longer. You know,
Right.
it's not going to make any difference. You know, in terms of stylistically, you could tell who the better man was there. And the thing that I always felt was that Crawford is so difficult to prepare for because you don't know what's coming. I refuse to believe that Derek James and Errol Spence thought that Crawford was going to come in there and fight 99.9% of that fight as a southpaw. He's just so difficult to prepare for, so very special. So, no, I would like to see Bud go against Jaron Ennis. I think that's where we want to go next. Well, that's what I'd like to see.
Well, that's what Sean Porter said when he was on Fighting Words last week, is that the thing that he was not expecting from Terence Crawford when he got in the ring with him is how he thinks. He doesn't know what he's thinking. And he said the mental game was what really, surprised him as an opponent. But we saw that kind of all week. Andreas and I had multiple conversations about there was just something different about Terence Crawford, not just compared to Errol Spence, but compared to any fighter we've ever seen leading into a fight week for a fight of this magnitude, which, granted, there aren't many of this caliber, but he had this swagger about him, this confidence about him, but it wasn't cocky. It wasn't trash talking. It wasn't trying to sell the fight like Wilder and Fury. He just knew he was going to go in there and get the job done. And he was respectful the entire time. I mean, they both were. The relationship that the two of them have is actually very admirable because they let the sport sell itself. They didn't have to, be obnoxious to sell this fight. But Terence Crawford was on point starting on Tuesday when he got there for the media. And that continued all the way up until Saturday night when he was handed the Ring Magazine belt. He was still on, not a scratch on his face. And he is very special for that. So special, in fact, that he is now number one on our pound for pound ranking list. And he actually bumped Inoue, who was the number one following his stellar performance on Tuesday. It was a pretty crazy week in boxing with these performances. So ultimately, what is the justification for now having Crawford above Inoue in our pound for pound rankings?
Well, I asked everyone, and the consensus was that Crawford, because he is essentially just knocked off a fellow top 5 pound for pound entrant, edges it. I mean, as good as Fulton was, and he's a terrific pro, and he was a unified champion. He wasn't in the pound for pound top 12. Never mind the pound for pound top 5. So I think when you look at the level of performance from Crawford, which was probably, Inoue probably equaled that in his fight. Spence is just more highly touted than Stephen Fulton. And like we had expected, most people, I don't know many people that really picked Fulton to beat Inoue. I know a lot of people, Andreas, who picked Spence to beat Crawford. So at the end of the day, to beat a guy like that, it was meant to be like the most even fight. It was meant to be like a Leonard Hearns, and it turned into an absolute whitewash. I think if you don't give Bud Crawford pound for pound number one off of that, what are you going to give him it for? He's just toppled Errol Spence and made him look ordinary. And that is literally what happened. It sounds like that could be hyperbole. It's not. He gave him an absolute beatdown. So I am the unofficial head of the Inoue fan club. I love the guy. He's my favourite fighter in world boxing. But I just think fair is fair, and Terence Crawford's the best pound for pound fighter in the world today.
Yeah, there's only one thing I'll disagree with you on, Tom, is that you said that Terence edges out in a way. No, he just ran right past him. He ran past him in a way that was that kind of a beating. We both said it. You have to do something spectacular. He had to do something spectacular. And he did something that was even more spectacular than I could have fathomed. He didn't even have any trouble. He faced a man who had never been in trouble, who never changed his facial expression in a fight. Errol Spence has been beating on welterweights for years, and Terence Crawford ran him over like it was nothing. And we got to remember, when this fight was first talked about several years back, the first thing Errol Spence said is, "You're too small." That's the first thing he said. These two fought, and Terence, he shoved him across the ring. His power jab moved him multiple times. This is pound for pound. He has moved up 2 weight classes to dominate a man who got the belts the hard way. He took out each person that he got a belt from individually. He didn't get them all in one fell swoop. I'm talking about Errol Spence. And Terence Crawford beat the brakes off of that man. The brakes off of that man. As much as I love Inoue, and I think he's a spectacular, special fighter, he now kind of finds himself in the spot that Terence Crawford was in a few years back. Meaning he was dominant, but he's not fighting the highest level of opposition. He's fighting quality opposition. But once somebody like Terence Crawford beats a pound for pound guy in that manner, there's Terence Crawford, and now there's everybody else in the pound for pound discussion. That man is special. So special, in fact, that he is now in the conversation for one of the greatest welterweights of all time. We have to truly discuss where he ends up as one of the greatest fighters of all time. I think the thing that gets lost on a lot of people, Terence Crawford was 36 years old turning in this performance. 36, not 31, not 30.
I thought 36. It was 35. I thought it was 35. Oh, we're not adding an extra year onto him, or you can deal with that.
No, well, he's 35. He turns 36 in 2 months, so close enough.
Sorry, 36. Yeah. Close enough. But who does this at this age, right? Like, who does this? There's no human that does this.
What I mentioned earlier on Twitter, it's eerily similar to Hopkins Trinidad, which we mentioned, because Hopkins, we knew he was elite. He was pound for pound top 10, but you didn't know how great he really was until he beat Trinidad, and Hopkins was 36 years old at that time. So, and a lot of people felt he was at the end of his career. And I think Crawford could conceivably, I'm not saying definitely, but I don't know what you think, Andreas. I think he could have the same kind of longevity because he's fresh. He's so fresh. I could see Crawford being an elite level welterweight, super welterweight in 4 or 5 years. Absolutely, I could. And what can he do in that space of time?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, we got to discuss this guy. Tom, I'm going to ask you this question. What does this version of Terence Crawford do with somebody like Floyd Mayweather? Floyd Mayweather never dealt with somebody like this. It's a fascinating fight. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, is because as great as Floyd Mayweather has been, he never beat anybody who was his pound for pound peer at their peak of their powers. He just didn't. And maybe it's not his fault, depending on who you ask. That's how it goes. He didn't fight Pacquiao when Pacquiao was at his best. He didn't fight Cotto when Cotto was at his best. He didn't fight Shane when Shane was at his best. Corrales was at his best, but that was very early in his career. Terence Crawford is a different kind of animal, to the point where you can fantasize about putting him in there with a Sugar Ray Leonard and a Floyd Mayweather and a Thomas Hearns, and just run down the list of great welterweights. And conceivably, you could have him winning against any of them. This is a special fighter.
Well, I'm not going to. I'm a Floyd Mayweather advocate. I enjoy Floyd Mayweather, and I think a lot of times because he retired unbeaten at 50-0, I think we look to critique every single win he had in one way or another because he had a perfect career, which I think is a bit unfair. Canelo was too green, and Cotto was past his best, and all the rest of it. But what people need to realise is that Mayweather was beating guys of that caliber when he was clearly so much smaller. I think he gave up 15 to 20 pounds to De La Hoya on fight night. And, it was the same with Cotto, who was significantly larger by that point. Canelo was massive compared to him. Even though it was a catch weight, Canelo would have rehydrated. Anyway, I digress. I think he is unquestionably a great welterweight. I just think it's unfair until the career is over. It's because he's got great fights ahead of him. At the moment, he is totally in the mix. He's an all-time great. He goes into the Hall of Fame skipping. His first ballot, you don't even need to look at the sheet. But a guy like Robinson, a legend like Robinson, a legend like Leonard, even Floyd, right? These guys done it, bought the T-shirt, finished their careers. It's a conversation I would like to have when his career is over. What I would bet is that he's going to end up sitting top 5 when all is said and done. Number 1 is very, very difficult for him to get. I mean, I had someone tell me yesterday that I shouldn't mention Sugar Ray Robinson and Sugar Ray Leonard in the same sentence. Now, the guy is clearly a village idiot for saying that to me. But, the bottom line is that shows you how difficult. If Leonard has been told, don't talk Sugar Ray Robinson, they're just going to say the same thing to Crawford.
So aside from winning all of the belts and upping his record to 40-0, he joins this very exclusive club. It's just Terence Crawford and Clarissa Shields for being the only 2-time undisputed champions in the 4-belt era. And she's already deemed herself the greatest woman of all time, and a lot of people agree with that. And I'm not arguing with her over that. She can take that out with Keith Thurman. But in regards to Terence Crawford, you just talked about how, you don't know where he ranks necessarily in the all-time greats for welterweight. But when we look at this modern era of boxing, years down the line, when you're talking to your kids and we're talking about, the boxing of the 2020s, is Terence Crawford going to be that name, that iconic name that we look back on and say, like, he was boxing, what he did was incredible? This is going to be one of those iconic fights that is referenced in the future for other massive mega super fights as, being the one to compare it to, being the Ali Frazier that was brought up multiple times by Andreas and all of these other fights. We know we witnessed history, but is this going to be something that is referenced in the future? And fortunately for Andreas and I, we can say we were there, but for Terence Crawford, that's how he's going to make his place in boxing history.
Yes. Terence Crawford is built different. A lot of fighters say that they're built different, but Terence Crawford is truly built different. He's not interested in the fandom. He's not interested in the celebrity. He's interested in fighting. The man loves competition. He thrives off of it. I've never seen a man built like this. He could care less about trying to sell a fight. He did his best this week. I'll give him a lot of credit. Like, he talked more than he's probably ever talked heading into a fight. But the animal instincts that he has in the ring when he gets in there to seek and destroy is phenomenal. And as to Tom's point, we don't know how his career is going to end. It could all get derailed. Roy Jones was an all-time great after he beat John Ruiz, and he should have stopped right there. And because he didn't, he's fallen so far down the pound-for-pound list because of those losses that he took. His career just went on too long. It happens. Terence Crawford could find himself in that situation. I doubt it, but it could happen. But as of right now, when we talk about all-time greats and we talk about things of this generation that we're going to remember, there are a lot of people going to go, where were you the night that Terence Crawford wiped the mat with Errol Spence Jr.? Because, it was one of those performances that you just don't see between two fighters of such a high caliber, respectively, in their primes. Phenomenal performance, phenomenal talent, a unique personality that, unlike anything that we've seen in boxing, no nonsense, doesn't come to play, comes to seek and destroy. And the biggest thing that I enjoyed about this fight, and Tom, I know you'll agree with this, these guys didn't mudsling each other. They were just competitive. That was it. They were just competitive. Their camps maybe bickered a lot. The people around them may have bickered a lot. But between those two fighters, nothing but respect. Because Crawford isn't here to disrespect you to sell a fight. He's just here to kick your ass. And he's done it multiple times over. And this was a special night.
Yeah, I'll tell you what else, right? For the first time ever, I think a person I'd like to give a lot of credit to is Harvey Dock. When that fight ended, I hadn't even noticed who the referee was. And that is unusual. Somewhere across a fight that goes long, a referee will get on my nerves. And I remember the fight gets stopped, and that was the first time that I actually seen the referee. So full credit to Harvey Dock last night. And in relation to Crawford, yes, you just need to look at the feedback online. Speaking to you guys that were there, you don't often get this kind of feedback when you're talking about a present fighter being compared to the kind of legends that we're bestowing on Terence Crawford here. So I think he's the best fighter of this generation now. But I think this generation is ongoing. It'll depend what Hanoi is definitely on his tail. Who knows what Errol Spence can do? Boxing can be crazy. You don't know what Errol Spence is going to do next. Does Canelo pull out another big fight? Does Usyk beat Tyson Fury? Anything can happen. You just don't know. But at this moment, he's in pole position. He looks like the guy who is going to go down as a transcendent figure in this era. And you know what else, Andreas? He pays his bets, mate.
Yeah. Look, Tom.
Carissa, get him told. $100, PayPal or bank details, your choice.
Don't worry, I got it.
Let me say this. I've never been more happy to give over my $100. To see that kind of performance, I am okay losing this bet. There is nothing.
Respect, big man. You'll win it back before the end of the year.
Well, maybe, but to see that kind of a performance.
Have you seen the rest of my predictions?
That's true. That is true. I'll probably get it back at some point. But to see what I saw, and it cost me $100 to you for making the pick, I'm fine with it.
Do you want me to make you feel? Listen, I'll make you feel better, right? I put on a bet at the bookies, right? I bet Crawford between rounds 10 and round 12 by KO, and I lost by like 35 seconds. I was actually shouting at the screen to tell Terence to calm down.
And he did. He did. In round 8.
No, he didn't calm down enough.
I know. In round 8, it seemed like he was carrying Errol just a little bit, and he was like, you know what? I'm done with this guy. Let me get him out of here. You need another 3 minutes to cash out. Sorry, Tom.
Well, I would also like to point out that our Rock'em Sock'em Robot predictions were also accurate. So science wins yet again. We'll just have to keep doing that for more fights. But it was truly an iconic, historic night. I can't believe I was there to see it. I know Andreas and I we kept repeating ourselves afterwards just how wild that was. We missed you a lot, Tom, but it was really hot in Vegas. I am exhausted. I know Andreas and I need to go take a nap, but he's got to go to Dallas to go cover Jake Paul and Nate Diaz. So unfortunately, the fun does not stop for Andreas Hale. We will be back next week to maybe talk about that fight, or maybe we'll find something else to talk about. Who knows? But we are still living on that Terence Crawford high. So for Fighting Words, I'm Carissa Maxwell. For Andreas Hale and Tom Gray, we will see you next week. And just go watch that fight again. Let's just go watch it again. Yeah? Sure. Cool. Yeah. All right. See you there. All right. See you next week.